In this episode of the Omega Podcast, we have the founder and CEO of Overflow, Vance Roush, our Silicon Valley partner focused on inspiring the world to give. Maximize your impact. Discretion. This podcast contains investing topics, financial management, and philanthropic spending. Please consult a qualified professional before making any financial decisions that can jeopardize your business. Digital Zoom.
Welcome to the Omega Expert Chat with Vance Roush, the founder and CEO of Overflow, on a mission to inspire the world to give. Specifically, Overflow unlocks unprecedented levels of generosity by empowering nonprofits, foundations, churches, and corporations to accept non-cash assets like stocks and crypto with ease. Vance, it's an honor to have you on the podcast.
Eden, what an intro. Thanks so much, man. I think you've done this before.
Of course. It's so great to see you. And it's been quite some time since we last connected, but I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm so excited for our chat and to be able to dig into the story of Overflow and maybe extract some principles that can help some people.
Absolutely. Well, to kick things off, what inspired you to create Overflow?
Yeah, so the story goes, I started my career in tech, started at this little company called Google. No, it was big at the time, 14,000 employees when I joined. It was a machine. It was fun, and learned a lot as an entry point into technology through that company. And then, from there, got recruited to lead product at a growth stage startup where I really bit my teeth into what scaling a small startup looks like. Simultaneous to that, maybe more notably, my wife and I, we helped co-found a church alongside our lead pastors called Vibe Church in the Silicon Valley. Right in the heart of Palo Alto is where we launched with 7 people in a living room. And today, actually this month, we celebrate 11 years of building this church with over 4,000 members across the globe. And so God has been moving. I say all of that because Overflow, if you take my experience in technology and my experience building a local church, and if that had a baby, that's over, essentially. And so specifically what inspired me to start Overflow is to solve a problem. I realized that people that had wealth in stocks, stock options in their companies, RSUs, ETFs, even, now cryptocurrency, didn't have an easy way to be able to give to the church, our church. And so just to solve that problem, I built Overflow, a streamlined way completely online where somebody can give stock or crypto to our church. And when I launched that at Vibe Church in 2019, toward the end of that year, I just realized that it unlocked unprecedented amounts of generosity that we had never seen before at Vibe Church. And when it started working for our community, I really got the sense that this shouldn't just be for Vibe Church, but this should be for churches and charitable organizations all across America. And so that next year, 2020, we're a product of the pandemic, but that July, even in the midst of the pandemic, we decided to officially launch Overflow. So Overflow is actually just a little over 3 years old, and we now serve over 425, actually nearing 450 organizations now, primarily churches and high-impact charitable organizations, to really give them superpowers in their fundraising efforts.
That's fantastic. And I know for sure when you're starting a business, there's a lot of details that go into providing the TAM, as you mentioned before, total addressable market, really finding a niche for this particular product to come to market. Can you share about your initial days starting your business? What was it like sort of developing, the brand, figuring out whether you're going to develop a nonprofit organizational structure or for-profit organizational structure for someone that perhaps might be in the starting stage of starting a business?
Yeah, it's harder, in my opinion, to create a culture. It's a lot easier or more natural to be a culture. And so when you're creating a brand, which is essentially another way of saying creating a culture, right, you first have to identify who you are. And so in the earliest stages of building out Overflow, even that name, I went on a journey with a couple friends that owned a branding company of just discovering who I was, right? And mind mapping different ideas around generosity. I remember putting generosity as one bubble and then thinking about, okay, to me, what does generosity mean? And I remember writing a line and putting another bubble, extravagance, right? That's the type of generosity that's always inspired me, an extravagant type of generosity. And then I wrote another line and I wrote fragrance, right? Like this ability for generosity to flood a room, to create an atmosphere, to create a fragrance that cannot be ignored. And then I wrote another line, abundance, right? That really generosity flows from this idea of abundance, not that you're abundant in resources, but you're abundant in gratitude, right? And generosity, true generosity flows from gratitude. And then I wrote another line from abundant, overflow. And then when I wrote that last line in that last bubble, it just hit me. I was like, that's the name of the company, Overflow. And so that's just one example of how we started creating the brand. And it was really actually first and foremost kind of a self-discovery of who I was and who I was called to be. And then how can I take that and apply it to the problems we were solving and the mission that we felt called to.
That's beautiful. The fact that you did the process of writing it out, kind of eliminating each and every single aspect shows just how provoking it is to have a company called Overflow. And we both know having an overflow in just any aspect of life is really enriching and just so abundant because you can be able to give, you can be able to do things that perhaps you couldn't do before. But one particular aspect about your business that I find to be so innovative and so amazing is that you're focused on non-asset giving, which is particularly a new way of giving for churches, for nonprofit organizations. How has this approach revolutionized giving platforms?
Yeah, so our focus on non-cash comes from our study and our research in where wealth is actually held, right? And so the top 1% of wealthy people in America would understand this, but 90% of wealth is actually in non-cash assets. Wealthy people hold their wealth in checking and savings accounts, right? They hold it in real estate. Most of America has their wealth in real estate, but if you are top 1% or even top 10%, you're starting to buy up securities, ETFs, investments, essentially. And so if that's where wealth is held, how come when you go to a church service or you go to a website of a charitable organization, the focus is give from your checking account, right? And so that's been our revelation, is that, hey, actually, if we can activate where wealth is actually held, we can unlock bigger gifts. We can unlock more generosity. And so that's really the primary purpose of why we've focused in that area.
Yeah, unlocking generosity is such a critical part of businesses because from a business perspective, there is tax benefits that are recorded that can actually assist organizations when they are doing their yearly tax work. Why do you think for-profit companies should invest in philanthropic spending? Where do you see the benefit is in that particular area?
Yeah. I think that when it comes to looking at governments, companies, and nonprofits, each sector serves a purpose, right? And so the reality is that nonprofits exist where governments and companies haven't solved problems. And so nonprofits bridge the gap. And that's why a lot of times, if you have an issue in a community that goes unaddressed, usually it's in the area of maybe human services and caring for the least of these. There's not a profitable way to do it. So companies are typically not super engaged in it, or it's not their priority. And then governments move too slowly, or maybe governments also have a prioritization issue in the things that they have to tackle. And so that's where nonprofits come in. It's usually a grassroots effort. It's usually a person with a burden that recruits a team and that wants to solve a specific pressing need in the community. And if they're solving a need and they're able to storytell about that, and they're able to show the impact from their work, they can essentially grow their nonprofit organization to continue to solve that problem, right? My view on companies' responsibilities towards that is a little bit nuanced. My conviction is that companies are set up for the purpose of maximizing shareholder value, and so that's what you should do primarily as a company. In saying that, I do think that there is a civic responsibility for companies, especially if they headquarter in a certain city, right, to engage into the problems, whether it's partnering with a nonprofit organization or creating in-house programs to activate their employees to care about their city. The reality is, if somebody is going into a city and working in that city, and making a living in that city, and the company is profiting by operating in that city, they should also contribute back to that city. That creates a vibrant community, right? And so I think first and foremost, the company should figure out how to become a profitable, how to become a growth-minded company that solves their primary problem with whatever product that they're trying to scale. But I don't think it's an either or. I think you can do both and.
Enjoying this expert conversation with Vance? Please leave a comment and let us know your takeaways. Digital Zoom.
Yeah, that's a fantastic response. And I loved how you touched upon being growth minded, being able to have a growth mindset, especially for organizations. But just to switch gears a little bit, when it comes to a growth mindset for leaders, particularly us in general, how have you sort of adopted that particular mindset throughout your evolution at Overflow? Has that been helpful in your business growth? Has that been something that has assisted you in order to receive capital from VCs or from investors? Where has sort of being a growth-minded leader assisted you in your development?
Yeah, my view of that has changed and evolved over time. What I've realized is that healthy things grow. And so if you are so obsessed and focused only on growth, sometimes it's actually harder to grow. But if you're obsessed and you're focused on health, if you're obsessed and focused on making your product better, making your team better, making yourself better, a byproduct of that is actually growth. And so in the past 12 months, specifically at Overflow, we've been largely focused on health. We've been largely focused on making sure that we have the right team, making sure that we're making the right investments, making sure that we're taking care of the customers right in front of us. And if we can continue to do the best with what's in front of us, we believe that a byproduct of that is growth. Actually, if you are serving your customers in the right way, your customers will demand you to grow because they want more of what you're serving.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That is fantastic advice. As we're in this particular era of future of work, right? You probably have heard that topic come about, how a lot of companies are adopting autonomous work models, hybrid work models. How have you been able to structure your business? Because you had mentioned you started 3 years ago, I'm assuming at the beginning or in the beginning of 2020. How have you been able to sort of mold your culture to be able to reflect the needs of businesses of today, or even just the needs of your current employees?
Yeah, the biggest thing is remote work, right? We were the product of the pandemic, like many other startups were between 2020, 2021, et cetera. And we didn't even have an option to have an office at that time, right? I am sitting in one of our studio spaces now where we have a hybrid type work environment where people can come in and work from here if they want. But primarily because we recruited initially with a remote mindset, our team is scattered all across America, with a few actually internationally as well. And so it's a new era in that standpoint. You see some of the big tech companies, though, calling their employees back in office. And so I feel like we're still in this global experiment to see what the right model is. I'm a big believer of in-person gathering. I'm a pastor at a local church, and so I'm not a big believer in exclusively online church. I think online church has a place in the space for people that might be just seeking and exploring and still discovering. But if you want to actually be embedded in community, I do believe that in-person interaction is mission critical. And so in our remote environment, for example, we try to be as intentional as possible, budget permitting, to bring people together from all across the nation that we have, even a couple internationally, to bring people together, fly them in, and do intentional times where we are collaborating, we're co-working, we're talking vision, we're building deeper relationships. And we try to do that as much as we can, budget permitting. And we want to continue to figure out how to do that more often in the future.
Yeah, definitely remote work is here to stay. And as long as organizations are able to provide that flexibility, it's definitely going to be a benefit to those that are working within the organization. But as we start to unravel about work culture, we talked a little bit about overflow. But when it comes to just being an individual person, Vance, for those that may not know, Vance is just an incredible person inside and out. He tours around the country at different venues, conferences, speaking. I just find that when I heard you speak in Miami, Florida, a couple of months back, I was just so drawn to just your passion. You just truly just light up a room. What advice would you give your younger self, prior to starting Overflow, prior to working at Google? If you could give your younger self some advice, what would it be? And how can that sort of pair to some of our listeners?
Yeah. To my specific younger self, and this is all contextual, I think what I naturally did well was exploration, and saying yes to a lot of things to be able to unlock that exploration. I dived into big tech, the startups. I dabbled with a couple startup ideas that had stops and starts, and launches and failures, and I dived deep into building a local church. I experimented with a lot of things in business. And so I think I naturally did that well. Maybe what I would advise or guide my younger self to do a little bit more of is specialization. And so while I became a decent generalist because I had a broad spectrum and exposure to things, I would have probably guided my younger self to pick a couple things that you feel like you're specifically called to, or you specifically have a skill set or talent for, and really double down on those things as well. And so I think you need both. I think in this world, especially with AI, where AI is going to be really good at specific tasks, generalists are going to be rewarded. People that can cross connect different concepts and bring them together. So I am glad I have somewhat of that type of experience of broadness of exposure. But I would say that diving deep into a topic or a skill set or a specific thing as well sets you apart and differentiates you in the quote unquote market.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What particular final thoughts or advice would you give to some of our listeners?
Start it, do it, take action, stop postulating about it, stop pontificating on it, stop, telling 100 friends that you're going to do something. Just do it. Just do it. Put one foot in front of the other. I tell my family all the time, it's one step at a time. Right? And just watch. If you take one step at a time and you keep doing that for a whole year, then you walk distance. And so you can do so much with momentum. So if you can do so much with momentum, do anything that you can to get it. And when you have it, do anything that you can not to lose it, and keep putting one foot forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Vance, for being on the Omega Expert Chat.
Thank you so much.